Welcome to Inside Ag. I'm your host, Savannah Peterson. Today, I'm sitting down with Ryan Flickner, the Director of Public Policy for Kansas Farm Bureau, and Claudia Hissong, the State Affairs Manager for Kansas Farm Bureau. We're going to be talking all things policy as we get into the new Kansas legislature. Welcome, guys.
Great to be with you.
Thank you.
Ryan, we just got done with the annual meeting. What were some hot topics discussed?
Yes, we did wrap up our 105th annual meeting back in early December. Had over 400 voting delegates here in town at Manhattan to discuss relevant policies, certainly at the state level, and Claudia will be more than happy to jump into some of those, as well as some of the hot topics that we want to pass along to AFBF at the national level. And later this month, here in January, we will have the AFBF annual convention in Salt Lake City. But I think to directly answer your question there, what were some of the hot topics? It seemed like the voting delegates might have I don't want to say a slow start, but Kat certainly had their tongue for the first part of the business session. And then when we came back and had motions to reconsider, we got into some fairly lively debate. There were some amendments and modifications when it came to the tentative policy on energy. And then another topic that had some from robust debate was dealing with credit, specifically the way banks are taxed versus some of the partners in the cooperative model, i.e. farm credit and credit unions. I don't know, Claudia, if you want to jump in, if there were any other hot topics that I've already forgotten in the short amount of time or not.
No, I think that you covered it well, and we'll dive into more of the energy policy, but we spent a lot of time on that. So yeah, really good discussion on the credit issue and energy, and it's always good to see members talking and discussing issues that are on their mind and that they've been thinking about throughout the policy development process, and really seeing that whole process come to light at annual meeting.
Claudia, what are some policy efforts that came out of the meeting that you're going to kind of be starting to focus on now?
Yeah, so as we were talking about, energy was a huge policy piece this whole year, and this really came to fruition last legislative session. There was a lot of policies and bills dropped relating to energy. Energy is on the minds of a lot of our members, as they are the landowners that are impacted by these transmission lines. They're being approached about renewable energy projects. So we didn't have a lot of energy policy, and our board noticed this and started an energy working group. So we brought members together from across the state with different viewpoints and interests and different connections to the energy space, and brought them together and really did a deep dive on energy issues. A result of that was about 16 new policies relating to energy, a key one being eminent domain. So what does eminent domain look like for those energy generation projects? What does eminent domain look like for those transmission lines? And that will give us, as the lobby team, some new policy to go forward as we go into the legislative session on what eminent domain reform can we work towards in line with our policy, and also looking at that compensation piece to make sure our landowners are compensated as their land is going to be changed by these energy projects that are being put in.
Claudia, what can Farm Bureau members expect going into the 2024 Kansas legislative session?
2024 legislative session will kick off January 8th. We're going back to the same dynamics we had in 2023, so supermajority in the House and Senate. The fun wrinkle that we'll have for this session is it is an election year. So with that will come some fun wrinkles and some fun talks under the dome. So we'll have to see kind of what schedule it looks like because gearing up for the 2024 election, legislators will be busy. Another key topic for the session is going to be taxes. Of 2023, there were some various tax plans and reduction mechanisms presented. Ultimately, legislature was not successful in getting their massive tax passage passed, so I expect another attempt at doing some tax relief for Kansans. What that looked like is still up in the air. There's some talk around Social Security taxes, flat tax, property tax. So when they come back in a session, I'm sure there'll be a lot of research and discussions around tax issues. KFB will be monitoring those conversations and engaging when needed. Our main priority is going to be protecting that use value of agriculture and making sure we have a supportive three-legged stool with all forms of tax and we're not relying heavily on property taxes and taxes that come back on our farmer and rancher members.
So Ryan, you just got back from a trip in Washington, D.C., where you kind of talked about some policy there. What kind of policy is being discussed on the national level?
Yeah, and after the state annual meeting in early December, President Joe Newland and I were able to go back to Washington, D.C. and try to advocate for our Kansas priorities in the American Farm Bureau policy book. That's called the Resolutions Committee process, and we had successful meetings in Washington, D.C. in mid-December. We got to visit with a number of the Kansas congressional delegation and again, advocate for our farmers and ranchers across the state. But when it comes to some of the hot topics of the day, number one, I think we got to all come to the understanding it is a frustration point. It's kind of a focal point now. Don't want it to sound derogatory, but that's probably how it's going to come across. We really kind of have a do-nothing Congress. Partisanship is at probably an all-time high. The majorities in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate are so slim. So how do you take policy that oftentimes is controversial, that is nuanced, but how do you forward that along? And I think that is really ultimately where American Farm Bureau, Kansas Farm Bureau, that's one of the challenges that we find ourselves in today. So I think some of the hot topics, we've got to do something with the Farm Bill. Congress did extend for one more year the 2018 Farm Bill, so that will expire September 30th of 2024. But we also know here in January, part of the federal government will cease to be funded, and the rest of the federal government will cease to be funded in February. So that is going to take a lot of oxygen right out of the gates as we start the new year. One of the hot topics that we are hearing more and more about all throughout Kansas, I don't care if it's Wallace County or Wyandotte County, it's access to labor. And as we want to grow our farm, we want to grow our operation, our business, everything from custom harvesters to hay and forage to feedlots and dairies, it is becoming increasingly difficult to find people that want to work in those operations. So I think a lot of time and energy, certainly from the Farm Bureau perspective, is going to be focused on some very nuanced fixes when it comes to AWARE and when it comes to the H-2A process. Hopefully, the seeds that we plant today with some of the challenges that we have in labor and immigration, quite frankly, hopefully those sprout and grow. And I don't think it'll be 2024, but hopefully some point in the very near future, we'll be able to have an honest conversation with both Republicans and Democrats alike in Washington, D.C. about the impediments of labor, what that is having on farms and businesses that want to continue to grow and prosper. So Farm Bill, labor, another very hot topic, and it is kind of a federal and a state issue, is not only energy, which Claudia alluded to, but this concept and this frustration of foreign ownership within agriculture. While not on the voting delegate floor at our 105th annual meeting back in December, but certainly at the policy summit that we had on Sunday before we got to that business meeting, we did have a lot of conversation, a lot of questions on what does foreign ownership mean? And I'll start it off on the federal level before I pass the baton to Claudia to do a great job of some of the stuff that she's been working on over in Topeka. But it's an acronym. There's a group of cabinet level secretaries. So the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Treasury, they are on a group called CFIUS. And they are basically the group that makes a recommendation should a foreign company be able to come in and purchase Smithfield, that's a swine processor here. Should Kim China be able to come in and purchase Syngenta when that happened previously? So unfortunately, and we do have American Farm Bureau policy asking for this, we want the Secretary of Agriculture at USDA to have a seat on that CFIUS organization to be able to really talk about the nuances when it comes to agricultural and agricultural businesses. I think we've got to take a real honest look when we start putting restrictions on who can buy, sell, and trades, especially a product like real estate and agricultural lands, because our policy book for decades has been very paramount and very strong in private property rights, so a willing buyer to a willing seller. Yes, let's have the honest conversation of what this means for national security. No, we don't want the Communist Party of China to come in and buy significant land adjacent to a U.S. military installation. So certainly something from a Kansas perspective, when we talk about Fort Leavenworth and McConnell, Forbes Field, Fort Riley, we got to be careful there. But at the same time, I'm a little, I guess, gun shy maybe about some of the fear mongering that's gone on. And Claudia has done a lot of research on this, as has Kansas State University. And I don't feel like there's this growing impediment or growing concern, because Claudia, correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe at last point there was a Chinese citizen married an American, and she owns a whopping 1 acre or maybe even a 0.5 acre tract of ground where I think, quite frankly, she's doing some farm to market and greenhouse type stuff. So the other thing from the federal perspective, that it is garbage in, garbage out. And what that means is there is a 1972 law that requires foreign entities to report their acreage to USDA. So as we look across the state of Kansas, there's a number of counties that do have significant, and I'm using air quotes here, so I know that our listeners on the radio won't be able to hear this, but significant, quote, ownership of agricultural lands in many counties in Kansas. As we've researched this more, what it really is, there's Netherlands companies, there's Canadian companies that own timber, that own leases to renewable energy projects, specifically wind energy. And once you're reporting to this USDA center, you never get off the list. So I don't even know if the information and the data that some of those folks that are saying we've got to have more and more restrictions on some of this, I don't even know if the data they're using is relevant and current. So I think we've got to just be very careful and not let the camel's nose get too far under the tent here. But yes, if it is a national security concern, let's have that honest conversation at the federal level. But Claudia, what do you have to add from the state level?
Yeah, so as Ryan mentioned, this is a hot topic that is popping up, and as more as we follow it, it seems more of a political talking point than an actual policy question. And that's where we've really tried to come in and say, what is the policy we are trying to push here? And then let's try to make a plan from there. This is not a political talking point. So our message has really been protect private property rights. If this is national security, it needs to be handled at the federal level. If every state comes up with their own laws and their own rules and their own regulations on how to manage this, what does that really do for national security? So we, instead of a patchwork of state laws and everyone kind of managing it on their own, what's a federal solution that we could support? And I think one way to do that is the Secretary of Agriculture on that review board and having the agriculture voice at the table. Ryan mentioned some great research coming out of Kansas State. Robin Reed, an economist there, has really delved into this issue surrounding renewable leases that are triggering that ownership. The way that reporting law is written, every lease longer than 10 years needs to be reported as ownership because it's an interest in that land. This was created a long time ago, and they exempted oil and gas leases. They weren't thinking about renewable leases at the time. So those wind and solar leases are reported. Here in Kansas, if we dig down to the data and take out that energy production, you'll see that 0.14% of all privately held land in Kansas has a foreign interest that is not related to energy production. As Ryan mentioned, in these conversations, you're normally thinking about Chinese and foreign adversaries. China is the lowest ranked country owning ag land that is not in wind and solar, and that's that 1 acre plot that is farmer's market. So I think that's good to know as we're involved in these policy discussions and looking at what is the solutions we're trying to get at. So as we go into 2024, I think it's going to continue to be a hot topic, and it's going to be something that continues to be debated at the State House. But we're going to try to focus that conversation on critical infrastructure and protecting those key spaces and that key infrastructure that the state has that protects national security and all of those entities that we are trying to protect. So that's kind of where the foreign ownership conversation is at the state level, but ultimately this is really a federal conversation and it needs to stay at that level.
Awesome. Claudia, you gave a great example of like doing your research and really paying attention to what people are talking about. How can KFB members kind of do their part to find that information and then go on and advocate that?
Yeah, great question. We're always looking for ways to, if members have an interest area, get in contact with us. We are always looking for people that are willing to come to Topeka and testify. So if there's a topic that you're really passionate about, let us know and we'll figure out ways to get you plugged in. We do a weekly legislative update that comes out to our members that are signed up for action alerts. So sign up for those if you aren't already. Those will come out every Monday, previewing what happened in the Capitol the last week, and we'll give you kind of a flavor of where we're heading. We try to do as much education through County Connection, e-news. We get a lot of information coming across our desk, and we're trying to push that out through field service managers, through newsletters. So if there's other avenues that are better for our members, please let us know. But we get a lot of information, so we're trying to find the best way to get it out. Our ag advisory committees are an excellent example of that. We bring members from across the state together and really focus on a sector of the industry, and they really take a deep dive and focus in on their industry and have those policy discussions and that fact finding and that knowledge gathering. So our ag advisory committees are really an instrumental part to our policy development process.
As Claudia and I have talked about, we have a huge amount of respect for our farmers and ranchers that trust us to go and advocate on their behalf, whether that be in Topeka or Washington, D.C. But we also know that elected officials and whether it be state or federal career bureaucrats, career employees, they need to hear directly from the grassroots. So we always try to sprinkle in a handful of various events throughout the year. Certainly with the 90-day session in Topeka, we're more limited on days that we can try to ask members to come there. But even when we go to Washington, D.C., we want to take them at a time and get our members in front of an audience that is willing to listen, willing to engage, and understand the challenges that are occurring on farms and ranches all across the state of Kansas. So coming up here early in the first quarter of 2024, throughout the month of January and February, we have 2 or 3 different events that we'd like to talk about and encourage participation in. We do have the upcoming American Farm Bureau Annual Convention. It's going to be in Salt Lake City, and the dates of that will be January 20th through the 23rd, with the business meeting happening that Tuesday, January 23rd. And really excited about our voting delegates from Kansas that will go and try to articulate and advocate for policies that are beneficial to farmers and ranchers in Kansas. The other trip that I would like to highlight, and certainly any listener that wants to get more information can go to our website, www.kfb.org, to find more information about our LEADS trip. LEAD stands for Leaders Engaged and Acting in D.C., and this is a every other year trip that we have planned and really have solid participation in excess of 100 participants on most years. And we have scheduled the leads for 2024 to happen from February 26th through the 29th. And that'll be another great opportunity to fly into Washington, D.C., get topical and current information from American Farm Bureau subject matter experts, go to Washington, D.C., go visit with our congressional delegation and advocate for that. And we are still trying to work through some different federal agencies, whether that might be USDA or EPA, even NASA, that can come and again, have a better understanding of how various rules and regulations impact farmers and ranchers here in Kansas. So excited for those 2 national advocacy topics to come up early here in 2024.
Another opportunity for members to be involved is our annual day at the State House. For 2024, it's going to be January 16th and 17th. So members are welcome to come in the evening of the 16th for a kickoff dinner. We'll go through some successes Kansas Farm Bureau has had in the last year, do some training around engagement at the local level, and then on Wednesday, January 17th is going to be all focused around what's happening in the State House and ways to be involved in the conversations. So we'll kick it off with Welcome to Topeka. We'll be hearing from leadership of the House and Senate on kind of what they're seeing as they start the 2024 session. We'll go through kind of what the lay of the land of Topeka, the supermajorities we're dealing with, the politics that we're dealing with, what an election year will look like as it relates to the legislative session. Well, you'll get to hear from your Cancer Farm Bureau lobby team on the priorities of the session. And then we'll have some workshops where we really do a deep dive onto some key issues. For example, energy, hot topics. So you'll get to hear a whole lot of topics that the lobby team has been hearing through all of you. We'll also be talking some local issues, hearing a day in the life of a lobbyist. We'll also be doing a deep dive on taxes. So those are really some great opportunities for members if they've got an interest area to really delve in and hear the nitty gritty and get in the weeds on those topics. And then we'll have lunch with our legislators. And then the afternoon is a great opportunity to have those one-on-one meetings with your legislator. So go through the steps, start setting up those meetings as soon as possible. We would love for all of you to have one-on-one conversations with your legislators because we know how important those relationships are. You also have the opportunity to attend committee meetings, watch some floor debate. So I think it'll be a really great day. And it's always one of our favorite days from a lobby perspective, and also getting to see all of you in the Capitol is really exciting. So make sure you're at our day at the State House to hear all the great things happening in Topeka and how Cancer Farm Bureau is being the voice of agriculture there.
Claudia, Ryan, do you guys have anything else to add?
I just appreciate the opportunity to get on the air today and really want to echo what Claudia said. We try to have our ear to the ground on so many different issues that impact our members directly, but we also have to rely on our members to pass that up the chain, so to speak. So if there is an issue in the countryside in your particular county, whether that is a new solar project that might be developed, or you have questions on some of the state water plan funding money that the state legislature passed last session and is now trying to implement. If there's a farm bill nuance, we've had a lot of questions on the ERP program and some of the complications that happened towards the end of 2023. But honestly, if there is anything out there in the countryside that gives our members concern, please reach out via email, via the phone, or reach out to a county coordinator, and they will certainly pass your question or concern along. And we will do our absolute darndest to try to get that member-created and member-driven state policy book and the American Farm Bureau policy book at the national level. We will do our darndest to try to get those implemented in Topeka and Washington, D.C., but honestly, it requires us to reach back out to members. So if there is an action alert that we send out later this session or later this year at the federal level, please engage, reach out to your elected officials and have that honest conversation about what that particular policy may do to your farm or business.
Yeah, so you guys are our grassroots membership, and you are the ones that make our job easier by showing up and being the real advocates at your legislative coffees, showing up today at the State House, hosting your legislator for a farm tour. So continue all the great work that all of you do in growing those connections in your district and in your counties. I can't emphasize enough how valuable those relationships are. So as you head into legislative coffees and town halls, if you ever need talking points or want to know where KFB is at on an issue, or you need some questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Ryan and I would be happy to provide whatever background information that you guys need to have successful coffees, because we know how impactful those relationships are. So please continue to do that work. And if you're ever in Topeka, let us know. We'd be happy to show you around, set up some meetings, and just really appreciate all the work that you guys do in your counties every day.
Claudia and Ryan, thank you both so much for joining me here on Inside Ag. Sounds like you guys are going to have a very busy session ahead of you. Again, I'm Savannah Peterson, your host for Inside Ag. If you liked this episode, be sure to share it with your friends.